When I was in grade school, I read a book. It was called Danny Dunn and the Homework Machine. And it was a story about a young boy named Danny and his friends. His mother was the housekeeper for a famous professor. And the professor had access, there was a whole series of these books, but in this particular book he had access to a very high-end computer, a computer that was able to understand natural language and generate natural language. And so Danny and his friends had the idea of taking all of their textbooks and reading them in to the machine. And they found that if they did that, they could then get the machine to do their homework, to write their reports and do their assignments. And this book, which was written in the late 50s, was actually amazingly prescient when we consider what's going on right now with generative AI. Well, for me, as a young kid, I was very hooked by this idea that you could have a conversation with a computer, and I thought, gee, you can't do that now, but maybe one day we will be able to do that. So I really became fascinated with the whole idea of artificial intelligence and what it might be able to do, although at the time I didn't even know that it was called artificial intelligence. As an undergrad at Stanford, I got my first exposure to really serious AI, to AI research, and I worked on a couple of different projects. One was a project to use computers to teach kids, students, how to program in BASIC, the computer language BASIC. And that was a lot of fun. That was a very satisfying experience and really set the stage for a lot of things I did later on in my career. The other area that I worked in was an area called automatic programming, which at the time was asking the question, would it be possible for computers to, instead of having to be programmed by people, program themselves? And I worked on a program that could take example input-output pairs. So you specify, here's the input, here's the output. Now, write a computer program that produces this output from that input. And that was actually the first paper that I had in a professional conference. I was a co-author on it. It was for I think the third International Joint Conference on Artificial Intelligence, which was held in Russia. So later, when I was at MIT and a graduate student going for my PhD, I was working in the clinical decision-making group at MIT, which was concerned with how could we build computer programs that would use AI to help doctors perform diagnoses or to give appropriate therapies, appropriate drugs. And one of the things that we realized as we were working in that area was that if a program offered a recommendation, no matter how good it was, if the computer couldn't explain to the doctor why that recommendation was the right thing to do, doctors were not terribly likely to follow the advice. And so the question was, how can you build a computer system that will look at a program that's executing and then offer an explanation of how that program works? And so that became both my master's thesis topic and then subsequently my PhD topic. And it really goes back to what happened earlier in my youth, where I became fascinated by being able to have a conversation with a computer. In this case, it was a very pointed and purposeful conversation about the particular elements of the recommendation and the therapy that was being prescribed. So you have to know a little bit about me. When I was a teenager, there were really two possible careers I was interested in. One was going into computer science, and the other was becoming a filmmaker. Both were really fascinating to me. I ultimately decided to go into computer science, but I remained interested in filmmaking and photography and all of those artistic efforts. I heard that the Department of Defense was interested in exploring a possible connection between the DoD and the entertainment industry. Now, shortly after the signing ceremony, the Army told us that what they wanted was for us to build them the holodeck. Now, they didn't really mean they exactly wanted the holodeck, but the idea, it was a metaphor, and the idea was they wanted something that was highly immersive, that would place people in situations where they weren't. As a first pass at that, we started a project that we called the Mission Rehearsal Exercise, and it was designed to bring together the best technology that we had for audio, for sound, for creating immersive sound environments, graphics, and the display of the graphics in a very immersive fashion, and AI underneath it all to power the characters and give them behavior that would seem to be believable. Over the years at the Institute, we developed a lot of technology for what's called natural language processing, getting a computer to understand human speech and be able to respond appropriately. And I think one of the best uses that we made of that technology was a project that we did with the Shoah Foundation here at USC. The Shoah Foundation, you may know, was started originally by Steven Spielberg, and that's the group that has been recording interviews with Holocaust survivors for years now, and they have literally thousands of interviews that they've done. Well, about 10 years ago, they came to us and they said, you know, for a lot of people, one of the highlights of going to a Holocaust museum is actually having a conversation with a Holocaust survivor, being able to meet them and talk to them about their experiences and about their life, both before the war, after the war, and everything else. But they're all getting a lot older, and we, in fact, are the last generation that will be able to have that sort of experience. Their question was, is there some way that we might be able to use AI to preserve that ability to have an interaction with a Holocaust survivor? And so what we did is we brought them, Holocaust survivors, a few of them, about a dozen, into the lab and recorded them in our light stage, which is our high-end computer graphics facility. And we recorded them with cameras literally all around them so we could create a three-dimensional representation of them to make this essentially a future-proof sort of operation. And we asked them the kinds of questions that people who go to Holocaust museums typically ask. Then, where the AI came in was in when somebody asks a question, we use speech recognition technology to understand the words that were said. And then we have a predictive algorithm that looks at the words in the question and then predicts, based on looking at all the available question-answer pairs, predicts what are the words that are likely to be in the answer. And so somebody asks a question, we feed in those words, we get the words that are likely to be in the answer, then the system looks through all of its available answers and picks the one that is the best match, and that's the one we play back. And the effect of this is it creates a conversational feeling for people who are involved in the experience. It's interesting that what I think makes this project really compelling is that it both mixes this use of artificial intelligence with things from Hollywood like narrative. And what we find is that when people are first interacting with the system, they think, oh, this is neat. The AI is answering my questions. I'm getting a good response to this. But after 2 or 3 times, what happens is the subject matter and the narratives that are involved take over. And all of a sudden, the AI sort of disappears and moves into the background. And people are really, I think, very moved. This project is one of the projects that I'm really proudest of that we've done here at the Institute. And I think that it's one that will clearly endure, because once there's not another opportunity to record these people. As we all know, anybody who's been around for the last 18 months or so knows, the recent revolution in AI has had a huge impact. And the popular press is full of articles about how AI is going to change the way we work and how we live in the future. While I'm not sure that all of the things that are predicted will necessarily come to pass, or not maybe on the timescale that's predicted for them, it is certainly the case that AI is going to have a very, very major disruptive effect. And one of the things that I've been concerned about, and that we've been concerned about here at the Institute, is that AI, knowledge of AI, and how it works is really going to be essential for keeping ahead of our near-peer competitors and preparing people for the jobs of the 21st century. So one of the things that we've done here at the Institute is we've started a new center. It's called the AI Research Center of Excellence for Education. And one of its chief goals is, how do we create AI literacy among the population at large? So the key idea, one of the key ideas, is we're trying to use AI to create tools for learning and to support instructors to make them more effective and learners more effective learners. The idea being, use AI to teach people about AI. So one of the key components of this Center for Excellence in Education is a system that we've called PAL3, which stands for Personal Assistant for Lifelong Learning. The idea has been to create an AI-based app that runs on your phone, but that has knowledge, has a learning record associated with you, that knows what you've done in the past, what courses you've taken, how you've done, what your mastery is of various topics. And it knows what your goals are, what you're aspiring to, maybe getting a new job in a new area, or passing the next advancement exam in some topic. And it then has a library of learning resources, and they can be a wide variety of different kinds of things, ranging from videos to websites to other apps, and it recommends, based on what it knows about you, what your past has been, and it knows where you're going, it recommends learning resources that will help get you from A to B, and records the process so that it can then update its model of you and what you're good at, what maybe you need a little work on. And we've used this system to deliver a wide variety of different kinds of content, ranging from things like electronics to leadership training, and most recently we've been using it for training people about artificial intelligence. We've used it in some of the classes at USC, and the students have been very receptive to it. It's not designed to replace a teacher, but instead it's designed to augment the learning experience so that when you're out of class, you can be studying materials, getting up to speed. The lessons are designed to be reasonably short, like maybe on the order of 2 to 3 minutes per lesson. So you can study while you've got a moment, a down moment, you're waiting in line somewhere, you can be studying. Then you can, put it in your pocket, you can come back to it, and it remembers where you were, so you pick up from exactly where you were. OpenAI rolled out ChatGPT, and the effect was amazing. All of a sudden, there was a system, an AI system, that could have a conversation with you about a very wide range of topics. It could write text for you. It could read text and critique the text that you had written. It had just really what were quite amazing capabilities. And all of a sudden, people started to realize both what some of the opportunities were with that technology, and also what some of the issues were with that technology. In the area of education, teachers became very concerned that students were going to use this to cheat on essays, and suddenly you had a system that would do your homework for you. So this became a big concern. There were other concerns as well. For example, as it turned out, generative AI systems, as things like ChatGPT are called, are really a function of the data that they're trained on. And if the data contains biases in it, well, then those same biases get reflected in the output that the systems produce. So in that environment, everybody saw that it was both an area that was very rich with opportunity, but also kind of fraught with a certain amount of peril. So at that point, President Folt of USC decided it would be good to start up an institute or a center that looked at generative AI and not tried to produce the next version of ChatGPT, but instead looked at what's the impact of generative AI on society, and how are we going to maximize the benefit while minimizing the negative aspects. And so she and Ishwar Puri, the vice president of research at USC, put together a plan, really, for creating this center. And I happened to be talking with Ishwar Puri about this, and suggested a few ideas that we might be able to do in the area of education. And so he funded an effort that has involved a collaboration between researchers here at ICT and at the Rossier School of Education, also at USC, to look at how is generative AI impacting education. And they're really, the people who are involved here, Ben Nye, who's our Director of Learning Sciences, and at Rossier, Stephen Aguilar, who is a professor in education, and Gail Sinatra, who is also a professor in education, have been very closely involved. There are really three major activities that we're taking on in the center, looking at generative AI's impact on education. The first is really trying to understand what's going on, because if you read the popular press, you get one view, but there hasn't really been a lot of systematic studies of really how generative AI is impacting education. And so one of the goals that we're pursuing in the center is to write a series of reports on generative AI and education and its impact. And the first report was rolled out this spring of 24, and there we have 3 additional reports that are planned. The second thing that we're doing is trying to, within USC, build a community of faculty who are interested in exploring how to use generative AI in their courses. And as our first target, we've actually looked at the writing program at USC. This is the course, of course, that all undergraduates take to improve their writing skills. And, going in, it's one of the areas that was most clearly going to be impacted by generative AI, because everyone was concerned that students would be using it to write their essays rather than writing the essays themselves. And so we've created a group of about 17 faculty members from the writing program, and we've been meeting on a monthly basis and discussing ideas and techniques and sharing experiences about what we've been doing. That group of faculty have also been involved in the third thing that the center has been doing, which is building a software tool to support writing using generative AI. And the interesting thing is, it doesn't work quite like you might think it works. Students don't use this tool to actually write their essays. Instead, they use it before they start writing to do brainstorming about the topic. So, for example, you might be thinking about putting a particular thesis forward, a particular idea that you wanted to explore and argue for. One of the things you can do with generative AI is set it up so that it takes the opposite point of view. And so you can have an argument, essentially, with generative AI and come to understand what are other points of view on this topic. And that's really useful before you start putting pen to paper or fingers to keyboard and writing your essay, because you then understand have a much better idea of what the context is that this essay is going to be received in. And there are other kinds of ways that you can do brainstorming with it before you even start writing. Then you write your essay. But then after you're done, generative AI comes into play again. And now it comes into play not for brainstorming, but instead as a critiquer of the essay that you've written. And it's critiquing at a higher level than something like Grammarly critiques, where Grammarly will tell you, oh, you're using passive voice too much, or something like that. What this does is it can actually look at the content of what you've written and critique your essay along a number of different lines. Like, for example, it turns out that although we think of generative AI systems as being things that produce text, they actually are maybe even better at reading text. And so it can read your text and then offer a critique. And the critique might be about the support that you've given your thesis. So you can identify the thesis in your essay and then say, okay, yes, but you haven't really backed up all the points you're making with evidence or references or whatever. Or you've done a good job on it, and it can give you a critique along those. Another thing it can do is offer you suggestions about the hook of your essay. That is the part in the introduction that gets people engaged and gets them to read the next paragraph. And it can look at it either from the standpoint of emotion. Does your essay, the introduction in your essay, engage people's emotions? Or look at it from the standpoint of narrative. Does it provide you, but is there a narrative? Is there a story that you're telling that is going to be engaging? And it can then, once you've received your critique, it can actually offer suggestions based on your essay of how it could be improved, and suggestions for things to think about in improving the essay. I can't believe it's been 50 years, because when I look back to when I started out working in AI, it really seems like only yesterday. But what's been amazing is that It continues to be fun. It continues to fascinate me. And there are so many more opportunities that we still have to explore.